From the government shutdown to issues here at home, I sit down exclusively with Reverend Joe Darby for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And listen to this interview later on iHeartRadio. Reverend Joe Darby,
Quintin.
It's so good to see you.
Good seeing you always.
I appreciate it greatly. So here we sit with some good news coming from your family.
Oh, yeah.
You are a proud grandfather.
I am the grandfather of Jax, Lawrence, and Zora Josephine Darby. And babies and mom and dad are doing well.
Doing well. They're doing well. How are you emotionally?
I'm good. I'm walking on the moon about it. I'm trying to get somebody I can spoil.
Spoiled.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, it's been a bit.
Define Reverend Joe Darby these days.
Busy, I guess. New pulpit. I'm enjoying that at Nichols Chapel AME Church now. Still active, I guess. That would be me.
You talk about active. There's so much going on in politics.
Oh, yeah.
From the government shutdown to now Congressman Joe Cunningham.
Yeah.
Let me take you to Washington. It's day 17 of the government shutdown, I believe. You love sitting around talking to a lot of people, and you've attended a lot of meetings here in Charleston and beyond. If you were to sit at the table right now with the President of the United States, what would you tell him one-on-one?
Number one, I wouldn't want to be sitting at the table with the President of the United States, or with the gentleman who lives in the White House, because he doesn't respect office, so I don't call him President. He's Mr. Trump. But I would tell him that it's inane and childish to endanger people's livelihood, not over a policy debate, but because you're acting like a large child who can't get your way.
You say that he doesn't essentially respect the office in your mind.
Exactly.
Who does he respect?
Himself, I think. Other than that, I don't think I've ever seen a more self-centered, arrogant, and insecure person in all my days.
Let me get you over to Congress. Obviously, Congressman Joe Cunningham is the new representative for the 1st Congressional District. And I know just a couple of days ago, Katie Arrington sent out the tweet in regards to Cunningham becoming the new congressman. When you look back at the election to right now, where does your mind go to?
I think Joe offers the best kind of hope for what politics can get back to be. He did not play the partisan game. He's focused on issues that are important to the community. And I think that just from talking with him, making policy was more important to him than winning at all costs. And I think he typifies what I hope America will get back to, to get people of varying parties who can disagree over policy and stuff like that, but put decency above winning at all costs. If we had that right now, then Congress would be better off.
And let me turn you over to Columbia. Obviously, Governor Henry Master will be sworn in for his first full term tomorrow in Columbia. What do you hope he will do as governor?
I hope Henry will be governor. I hope that he will try to be everyone's governor. I hope that he will go beyond rhetoric. I hope that he appreciates the fact that he's reached the pinnacle in the state that I know he's wanted to reach for quite some time. So he doesn't have to make moves that are politically calculated to his quote-unquote base. He can do what's right by education, by infrastructure, by health care, by all of those things that are critical needs in South Carolina. And so I would hope that he would offer leadership in those areas.
You talk about the education, healthcare, and infrastructure. If you were to write a first person column about those issues right now, what would the headline be?
It's time for some courage. And it would go towards the direction not only of delineating those things, but of making sure that those we elect to office have the political will to actually deal with those things, make some tough decisions. And as I said, not just make decisions that say, what will my voters think of this? And will they boot me out if I do the right thing? If you have to ask if you're going to get booted out for doing the right thing, you need to retire.
And let me turn you back here to Charleston. Obviously, there are 2 big mayoral elections coming up in November.
Oh, yeah.
John Teckenberg is running for re-election.
Yeah.
So is North Charleston Mayor Keith Sonny.
Yeah.
When you think of those particular races, where does your mind go to with those races?
I think that John has done a good job. I'd be curious to see who runs against him. I think that Mayor Sami is Mayor Sami. We'll wait to see who's running against him.
And then, as of right now, it's John Singletary, Pastor Thomas Dixon, and I believe Ashley Peel.
Okay. It'll be interesting to see how it comes out. I know that he has considerable political clout in North Charleston, so we'll see how that comes out.
And obviously, those particular two, cities have changed tremendously.
Oh, massively.
And every time you hear people are talking about gentrification.
Oh yeah.
How do you define that right now in 2019?
Gentrification to me, and it's something that I wish the city of Charleston would actually deal with. It's when people put profit over people's well-being, put property over people's well-being. When you have a city where developers are allowed to bombard people with letters saying, "Sell me your house, please sell me your house," it changes the character of a community. When I came here in 1998, when I was pastoring Morris Brown, I had an appreciable portion of the congregation within walking distance of the church. Now, I don't know that anybody that was there then is in walking distance now. They're in driving distance, and in some cases, distant driving distance, because the peninsula has changed. Rents and home sale prices have gone sky high, and a lot of people of modest means cannot live on the peninsula. It's one thing to talk about affordable housing, but if you are well off enough to live on the Battery, if that's what you can afford, that's your affordable housing. What we need to do is develop our economy a little bit more and do some things to really create affordable housing and not just lip service about affordable housing, and to make sure that Charleston continues to be a diverse city. I'm very glad we're doing some things to apologize for and reconcile Charleston's history of slavery. But if those whose ancestors are touched with that history can't live in Charleston anymore because it costs too much, then that's a sad irony.
Is the apology enough in your mind?
It's a start. After you apologize, what do you do then? I know that they said they're going to bring aboard somebody, kind of like an ombudsman for things like that. That's a step. I think you have to look at business development. That's a step. I think you need to look at what the city does. It can't finance the schools, but it can be supportive of the schools. That's a step. I think making sure that law enforcement is transparent and even-handed, that's a step. I think doing the kind of job development that will give folks quality jobs, not just baseline jobs, and acknowledging the fact that you have to do some things beyond just the minimum in order to do that. I appreciate the fact and I respect the fact that my Jewish brothers and sisters suffered horrendously during the Holocaust. That was a cultural changing event for them. Holocaust was a decade or so. American slavery was 400 years. So there's a lot of repair that needs to be done still in the African American community.
You talk about schools, I gotta take you to 75 Calhoun. Obviously, there's a lot of allegations coming out about former Charleston County School District employee Marvin Gabbers.
Yeah.
Talk to me about where your heart and mind are right now.
I would hope that the school district would take steps to protect our young people. That's a necessity, and I would hope that things have evolved, because I understand that there's a little bit of time that's passed since those things happened. I hope that things have evolved to the point that they will not only be transparent, but they'll take swift action now. Just about every other entity I know in government and a lot in the private sector have zero tolerance for that kind of thing. And CCSD needs to have a zero tolerance for that kind of thing as well.
And obviously, there's a new Charleston County School Board right now.
Yeah.
When you look at those board members, what do you say?
Do your job and keep the children first. Too often when I've gone to school board meetings, you see people playing power games, settling old grudges, looking possibly to use that as a stepping stone. And priority one should be making sure that every child in Charleston County has a right and a privilege of a quality education on a level playing field. Burke High School ought to have the resources, the energy, and everything that Wando High School has. You need to, when you evaluate schools, because they're talking about possibly closing or consolidating some schools to make things better, to do that with an eye towards fairness. When they were talking about closing Lincoln High School, they said Lincoln's too small, there's not enough students. But they're busing those kids to Wando.
Right.
Now, if there are not enough students, why not change the northern end of Wando's attendance zone? Send those kids to Lincoln. Then you could have built a new school up there. Then that legacy would have continued. But I had one of the personnel at CCSD tell me white parents in that area would not send their children to a traditionally black school. Because of fear of the building, because of latent prejudice. I think the district needs to make sure that they're even-handed and that those parents who cannot make it to express themselves in school board meeting or who have reluctance to advocate as some other parents do, that those parents are still taken into consideration and when they plan for the schools.
Burke High School.
Mm-hmm.
How does that legacy continue?
Burke's legacy definitely needs to continue, and I think it continues when the district actively and aggressively looks at ways and means of encouraging parents in their community to send their children to Burke High School. Burke, the irony is that if Burke actually grows to what Burke should be these days, probably be a majority white school. It's an historically black campus. But most of the neighbors around there now are white, and they are not sending their children to Burke. And I understand everybody wants the best for their child, but the district needs to make sure that the climate is there to reassure those parents that the facility is good, that the course offerings are good, that the staffing is good, that everything is in place. And when you do that, then you're able to go to people and say, okay, you have everything at Burke that you have at West Ashley, that you have at Wando. The only thing that's different is that Burke is a traditionally black school, that we have a higher black population. Is that why you don't want to send your child to Burke High School? And make some of these very young, very progressive parents who are all kumbaya now actually say whether or not they're acting on their prejudices or whether they can practice what they preach.
The Honorable Reverend Joe Darby.
I'm not honorable.
In my mind, yes. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it, man.
Anytime.
Okay.
Yes, sir.